The sun was just beginning to dip below the horizon, casting a warm golden glow over the bustling streets of Los Angeles. The city hummed with its usual rhythm, cars honking, people chatting, and the faint hum of electric vehicles gliding silently through the traffic. Among the sea of faces was a man named Javier, a delivery driver in his early 30s, whose life revolved around the constant motion of his job. His days were a blur of navigating through the city's labyrinthine streets, delivering packages to doorsteps, and chasing the clock to meet deadlines. Javier wasn't just a delivery driver. He was a dreamer, though his dreams often felt like distant stars, visible but out of reach. He had a knack for fixing things, tinkering with gadgets in his small apartment during his rare moments of downtime. He'd always been fascinated by technology, especially the kind that seemed to change the world overnight. But for now, his world was his beat-up delivery van, his GPS, and the endless stream of packages that needed to be delivered. Javier's life was simple but demanding. He worked long hours, often sacrificing weekends and holidays to make ends meet. His van, a relic from the early 2000s, was his constant companion, though it seemed to grow louder with each passing day. He'd named it Lucky, though luck hadn't exactly been on his side lately. The van's engine had been acting up, and Javier knew it was only a matter of time before it gave out completely. Money was tight, and the thought of repairs, or worse, replacing the van, kept him up at night. Still, Javier had a quiet resilience about him. He believed in hard work and the idea that if he kept pushing forward, something good would eventually come his way. Little did he know, his life was about to take a turn he could never have imagined. One evening, as Javier was making his last delivery of the day, he found himself in a part of the city he rarely visited, a sleek, modern neighborhood filled with towering glass buildings and luxury cars. The address on the package led him to a sprawling estate, its gates adorned with intricate designs and a discreet sign that read Tesla headquarters. Javier's heart skipped a beat. He'd heard stories about this place, about the man who owned it, Elon Musk, the visionary behind Tesla, SpaceX, and countless other ventures that seemed to redefine the future. Javier had always admired Musk from afar, not just for his success, but for his relentless drive to push boundaries and make the impossible possible. He never imagined he'd be standing at the gates of Musk's estate, holding a package addressed to the man himself. As Javier approached the entrance, he was greeted by a security guard who scanned the package and directed him to a side entrance. Javier couldn't help but feel a mix of awe and nervousness as he stepped inside. The estate was unlike anything he'd ever seen, a blend of cutting-edge technology and elegant design. The walls were lined with screens displaying futuristic concepts, and the air buzzed with the energy of innovation. Javier was so engrossed in his surroundings that he almost didn't notice the man walking toward him. Dressed in a simple black t-shirt and jeans, Elon Musk looked just as he did in the photos, intense, focused, and slightly larger than life. Javier froze, unsure of what to say or do. Musk, however, greeted him with a warm smile and a nod of thanks as he took the package. For a moment, Javier stood there, starstruck. He wanted to say something, to express his admiration, but the words caught in his throat. Musk, sensing his hesitation, paused and looked at him. "Long day?" he asked, his tone casual and friendly. Javier nodded, managing a small smile. "Yeah, just the usual," he replied, his voice tinged with exhaustion. Musk studied him for a moment, his sharp eyes taking in the details, the worn-out shoes, the tired expression, the faint grease stains on Javier's hands. "You look like someone who knows their way around machines," Musk said, his curiosity piqued. Javier's eyes lit up at the mention of machines. "I do a bit of tinkering in my spare time," he admitted, his voice gaining confidence. "Nothing fancy, just fixing things here and there." Musk's interest was immediately sparked. He loved meeting people who shared his passion for innovation and problem-solving. "What kind of things?" he asked, leaning in slightly. Javier hesitated for a moment, then began to talk about his love for technology, his dreams of creating something meaningful, and the challenges he faced trying to balance his aspirations with the demands of his job. Musk listened intently, his expression thoughtful. When Javier finished, Musk nodded slowly, as if piecing together a puzzle in his mind. "You've got potential," he said finally, but potential needs opportunity. Javier wasn't sure what to make of the comment, but before he could respond, Musk handed him a business card. Come by the office tomorrow. Let's see what we can do. As Javier drove home that night, his mind raced with possibilities. He couldn't shake the feeling that something big was about to happen, though he couldn't quite put it into words. The encounter with Musk had been brief, but it had left a lasting impression. For the first time in a long while, Javier felt a spark of hope, a sense that maybe, just maybe, his dreams weren't as far out of reach as he'd thought. Little did he know, his life was about to change in ways he could never have imagined, all because of a chance encounter with a man who believed in the power of dreams and the people who dared to chase them. The next morning, Javier woke up earlier than usual, his mind still buzzing from the previous night's encounter. He stared at the business card Musk had given him, turning it over in his hands as if it might disappear if he looked away. The card was simple, black with white lettering, just Musk's name and a phone number. No title, no company logo, nothing flashy. It felt almost surreal, like a piece of a dream he'd accidentally brought into the waking world. Javier knew he had to go to the office, but the thought filled him with equal parts excitement and dread. What if Musk had just been polite? What if this was all some kind of misunderstanding? He shook his head, trying to push the doubts aside. This was his chance, and he wasn't going to let fear hold him back. When Javier arrived at the Tesla headquarters later that morning, he was greeted by a sleek, modern building that seemed to hum with energy. The receptionist, a friendly woman with a warm smile, directed him to a waiting area after he mentioned Musk's name. Javier sat down, his nerves on edge as he glanced around the room. The walls were adorned with blueprints and prototypes, each one a testament to the relentless innovation that defined Musk's companies. Javier couldn't help but feel a sense of awe, but it was quickly overshadowed by the weight of his own insecurities. What was he even doing here? He was just a delivery driver with a knack for fixing things. What could he possibly offer to someone like Elon Musk? Before he could spiral further into self-doubt, Musk appeared, his presence commanding yet approachable. Javier, right? He said, extending a hand. Javier stood up quickly, shaking Musk's hand with a firm grip. Yes, sir. Thank you for seeing me, he replied, his voice steady despite the butterflies in his stomach. Musk smiled, his eyes sharp and assessing. No need for formalities. Come on, let's talk. He led Javier through a series of hallways, each one more impressive than the last, until they reached a spacious office filled with screens, prototypes, and stacks of papers. Musk gestured for Javier to sit, then leaned against his desk, his gaze focused and intent. Tell me more about your tinkering, Musk said, cutting straight to the point. Javier hesitated for a moment, then began to talk about the projects he'd worked on. The old radio he'd restored, the broken laptop he'd brought back to life, the small gadgets he'd built from scratch. As he spoke, his passion became evident, his words flowing more freely as he described the joy he found in solving problems and creating something new. Musk listened intently, nodding occasionally and asking pointed questions that pushed Javier to think deeper. By the time Javier finished, Musk was smiling, a glint of excitement in his eyes. You've got talent, he said, but talent needs direction. How would you like to work with us? Javier's heart skipped a beat. Work with you? Here? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Musk nodded. We're always looking for people who think differently, who aren't afraid to get their hands dirty and push boundaries. I think you'd fit right in. Javier felt a surge of emotion, gratitude, disbelief, hope, all swirling together in a dizzying mix. I don't know what to say, he stammered. Musk chuckled. Say yes. We'll start you off in the engineering department. See where your skills take you. Javier nodded, still in shock. Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Musk. Musk waved a hand dismissively. Call me Elon. And don't thank me yet. This is just the beginning. As Javier left the office that day, he felt like he was walking on air. He couldn't wait to share the news with his family and friends, but as he reached for his phone, he hesitated. What if they didn't believe him? What if they thought he was exaggerating or, worse, lying? The doubts crept in, but Javier pushed them aside. This was real. This was happening. He was going to work for one of the most innovative companies in the world, and nothing was going to take that away from him. Over the next few weeks, Javier threw himself into his new role with a fervor that surprised even himself. He spent long hours at the office, learning the ropes and soaking up knowledge like a sponge. His colleagues were a mix of brilliant minds from all over the world, each one bringing their own unique perspective to the table. Javier felt out of place at first, but he quickly found his footing, his practical experience and hands-on approach earning him the respect of his peers. He was assigned to a team working on a new battery technology, a project that had the potential to revolutionize the industry. Javier was in awe of the work being done, but he also felt the weight of responsibility. This wasn't just a job. It was a chance to be part of something bigger than himself. As the days turned into weeks, Javier began to notice subtle changes in the atmosphere around him. The initial excitement of his new role was still there, but it was now tinged with a growing sense of pressure. The project deadlines were tight, and the stakes were high. Every decision, no matter how small, felt like it could make or break the entire endeavor. Javier found himself working late into the night, his mind racing with ideas and solutions. He was determined to prove himself, to show that he belonged here. But the constant grind was taking its toll. He barely had time to eat, let alone sleep, and the stress was starting to show. One evening, as Javier was hunched over his desk, poring over a set of schematics, Musk walked in. He looked as focused as ever, but there was a hint of concern in his eyes as he took in Javier's disheveled appearance. "You've been burning the midnight oil," Musk observed, his tone casual but probing. Javier looked up, startled. "Yeah, just trying to keep up," he replied, his voice tinged with exhaustion. Musk nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Hard work is important, but so is balance. You can't pour from an empty cup, Javier." The word struck a chord, but Javier wasn't sure how to respond. He wanted to say that he was fine, that he could handle it, but the truth was, he wasn't so sure anymore. Musk seemed to sense his hesitation. "Look, I know this is a lot to take in, but you're not alone in this. We're a team, and we're all in it together. Don't be afraid to ask for help when you need it." Javier nodded, feeling a mix of relief and guilt. He didn't want to let anyone down, least of all Musk, who had taken a chance on him. But he also knew that Musk was right. He couldn't keep going like this. As Musk left the room, Javier leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. He needed to find a way to manage the pressure, to keep pushing forward without losing himself in the process. But how? The answer came in the form of an unexpected challenge. A few days later, the team hit a major roadblock in the project. The new battery technology they were developing had a critical flaw that no one could seem to fix. The mood in the office grew tense as the deadline loomed closer, and Javier could feel the weight of everyone's expectations bearing down on him. He spent hours poring over the data, running simulations, and testing different solutions, but nothing seemed to work. The frustration was palpable, and Javier could feel himself reaching a breaking point. It was during one of these late-night sessions that Javier had a breakthrough. He remembered something Musk had said during their first meeting, about thinking differently, about not being afraid to challenge the status quo. Inspired, Javier decided to take a step back and approach the problem from a completely new angle. He spent the next few hours experimenting with unconventional materials and configurations, his hands moving almost instinctively as he worked. And then, just as the first rays of sunlight began to peek through the windows, it happened. The battery worked. Not just worked, but exceeded all expectations. Javier felt a surge of triumph as he stared at the glowing screen, the numbers confirming what he already knew. He had done it. When Musk arrived at the office later that morning, Javier was waiting for him, a mix of excitement and nervousness bubbling inside him. "I think I found a solution," he said, his voice trembling slightly. Musk raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Show me." Javier led him to the lab, where the prototype was set up. As he explained his approach, Musk's expression shifted from curiosity to admiration. "This is brilliant," he said finally, a rare smile spreading across his face. "You've just saved the project, Javier." The words filled Javier with a sense of pride and accomplishment, but they also brought with them a new wave of pressure. He had proven himself, but now the expectations were even higher. As the days went by, Javier found himself caught in a whirlwind of success and stress. The project was back on track, but the demands only seemed to grow. He was pulled into more meetings, given more responsibilities, and expected to deliver results at an even faster pace. The lines between work and life blurred, and Javier struggled to find a balance. He missed his old routine, the simplicity of his delivery job, but he also knew he couldn't go back. He had tasted success, and it was intoxicating, but it came at a cost. The tension in the office continued to build, fueled by the relentless pace and the high stakes. Javier could feel the strain in his relationships with his colleagues, the once friendly banter now replaced by curt exchanges and competitive undertones. He tried to stay focused, to keep pushing forward, but the pressure was starting to wear him down. He found himself snapping at people, making careless mistakes, and second-guessing his decisions. The confidence he had felt after his breakthrough began to waver, replaced by a gnawing sense of doubt. One evening, as Javier was leaving the office, he ran into Musk in the parking lot. Musk looked as composed as ever, but there was a hint of concern in his eyes as he took in Javier's exhausted appearance. "You look like you've been through the ringer," Musk said, his tone light but probing. Javier forced a smile. "Just a rough day," he replied, though the words felt hollow. Musk studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Remember what I said about balance? You're no good to anyone if you're running on empty." The words hit home, but Javier wasn't sure how to respond. He wanted to say that he was fine, that he could handle it, but the truth was, he wasn't so sure anymore. As Javier drove home that night, his mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. He had achieved more than he ever thought possible, but at what cost? The success, the recognition, the sense of purpose, it all came with a price. He knew he needed to find a way to manage the pressure, to keep pushing forward without losing himself in the process. But how? The answer eluded him, but one thing was clear. He couldn't keep going like this. Something had to give. The day started like any other, but Javier could feel the tension in the air the moment he stepped into the office. The project was nearing its final stages, and the pressure was palpable. Every detail mattered, every decision carried weight, and the team was stretched thin. Javier had been working around the clock, his mind constantly racing with ideas and solutions. He had become the go-to person for troubleshooting, the one everyone turned to when things went wrong. But the constant demands were taking their toll. His hands trembled slightly as he sipped his coffee, the caffeine doing little to calm his frayed nerves. The morning passed in a blur of meetings and last-minute adjustments. Javier was in the lab, fine-tuning the prototype, when he overheard a conversation that stopped him in his tracks. Two of his colleagues were discussing a critical flaw in the battery design, a flaw that had been overlooked in the rush to meet the deadline. Javier's heart sank as he listened, the words hitting him like a punch to the gut. He had been so focused on his own tasks that he hadn't noticed the oversight. And now, it threatened to derail everything they had worked for. Javier's mind raced as he tried to process the information. He knew he had to act quickly, but the weight of the situation was overwhelming. He felt a surge of panic, his chest tightening as the reality of the situation sank in. He had to tell Musk. There was no other option. But the thought of facing him, of admitting that they had made a mistake, filled Javier with dread. He had worked so hard to prove himself, to earn Musk's trust, and now it felt like it was all slipping through his fingers. Taking a deep breath, Javier made his way to Musk's office. The walk felt like an eternity, each step heavier than the last. When he finally reached the door, he hesitated for a moment, his hand hovering over the handle. Then, steeling himself, he knocked and entered. Musk was at his desk, surrounded by screens and papers, his focus unwavering. He looked up as Javier entered, his expression unreadable. "What is it?" he asked, his tone sharp and to the point. Javier swallowed hard, his mouth dry. "There's a problem with the battery design," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "A critical flaw. We missed it in the testing phase." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Musk's expression darkened, his eyes narrowing as he processed the information. "How bad is it?" he asked, his voice low and controlled. Javier hesitated, then shook his head. "Bad. If we don't fix it, the entire project could fail." For a moment, there was silence, the tension in the room almost unbearable. Then, Musk stood up, his movements deliberate and measured. "Show me," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Javier nodded, leading the way to the lab. As they walked, he could feel the weight of Musk's gaze on him, the unspoken questions and expectations pressing down on him. He wanted to explain, to justify, but he knew there was no point. The only thing that mattered now was finding a solution. When they reached the lab, Javier quickly pulled up the data, his hands moving with a sense of urgency. He explained the flaw, his words tumbling out in a rush as he tried to convey the gravity of the situation. Musk listened intently, his expression growing more serious with each passing moment. When Javier finished, there was a long pause, the silence stretching out as Musk processed the information. Then, he turned to Javier, his eyes sharp and assessing. "What's the plan?" he asked, his tone calm but firm. Javier blinked, caught off guard by the question. I don't know," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "We need to find a solution, but I'm not sure where to start." Musk studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Then we start from the beginning. We go back to the drawing board and figure this out. Together." The words were a lifeline, a glimmer of hope in the midst of the chaos. Javier felt a surge of gratitude, but it was quickly overshadowed by the enormity of the task ahead. The next few hours were a blur of activity. Musk worked alongside Javier and the team, his presence a constant source of focus and determination. They pored over the data, ran simulations, and tested new configurations, their movements fueled by a sense of urgency. The atmosphere in the lab was tense, the air thick with concentration and the occasional burst of frustration. But through it all, Musk remained calm, his steady presence a grounding force. As the hours turned into the early morning, exhaustion began to set in. Javier's hands were shaking, his vision blurring as he struggled to keep his focus. He felt like he was running on empty, his body and mind pushed to their limits. But he couldn't stop. Not now. Not when they were so close. He glanced at Musk, who was still working with the same intensity as when they had started. There was no sign of fatigue, no hint of doubt, just pure, unrelenting determination. And then, just as the first rays of sunlight began to peek through the windows, it happened. They found a solution, a new configuration that addressed the flaw and exceeded their expectations. The mood in the lab shifted instantly, the tension giving way to a sense of triumph. Javier felt a surge of relief, his body sagging with the weight of the release. They had done it. Against all odds, they had found a way to fix the problem. Musk turned to Javier, a rare smile spreading across his face. "You did it," he said, his tone filled with genuine admiration. Javier shook his head, his voice trembling with emotion. "We did it," he replied, the words carrying a weight of gratitude and respect. Musk nodded, his expression softening. "This is what we do. We push boundaries, we solve problems, and we don't give up. Remember that." As the team began to celebrate, Javier felt a sense of pride and accomplishment that he had never experienced before. He had faced the impossible and come out on the other side. But more than that, he had learned something invaluable about himself, about resilience, and about the power of teamwork. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, Javier felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. The immediate aftermath was a mix of relief and reflection. The team worked tirelessly to implement the new configuration, their movements fueled by a renewed sense of purpose. Javier found himself at the center of it all, his role more crucial than ever. But the experience had changed him. He had seen the best and worst of himself, and he knew that he couldn't go back to the way things were. He needed to find a balance, to take care of himself as much as he took care of the project. As the days turned into weeks, Javier began to notice subtle changes in the way he approached his work. He was still driven, still passionate, but he had learned to pace himself, to recognize his limits and ask for help when he needed it. The pressure was still there, but it no longer felt overwhelming. He had found a way to navigate the chaos, to keep pushing forward without losing himself in the process. And through it all, Musk remained a constant presence, a source of inspiration and guidance. He had seen something in Javier, something that even Javier hadn't fully recognized. And in doing so, he had given him the opportunity to rise to the occasion, to prove that he was capable of more than he had ever imagined. It was a gift, one that Javier would carry with him for the rest of his life. As the project neared its completion, Javier felt a sense of fulfillment that went beyond the success of the battery technology. He had found a sense of purpose, a place where he belonged. And he knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, he had the strength and resilience to face them. The journey had been anything but easy, but it had been worth it. And as he looked to the future, Javier felt a sense of hope and possibility that he had never known before. The days following the breakthrough were a whirlwind of activity and emotion. The team worked tirelessly to finalize the project, their movements fueled by a mix of relief and determination. The atmosphere in the office was electric, a stark contrast to the tension that had dominated the weeks prior. But beneath the surface, there was a sense of reflection, a quiet acknowledgement of what they had been through and what it had cost them. For Javier, the aftermath was a time of introspection. He had proven himself in ways he never thought possible, but the journey had taken its toll. He found himself replaying the events in his mind, the moments of doubt and fear, the sleepless nights, and the overwhelming pressure. He had pushed himself to the brink, and while he was proud of what he had accomplished, he couldn't ignore the toll it had taken on his mental and physical health. He had learned the hard way that success came with a price, and he knew he needed to find a better balance moving forward. Musk, too, seemed to be reflecting on the events. He had always been a man of action, driven by an unrelenting focus on his goals. But the crisis had forced him to confront the human element of his work, the toll it took on the people who made his vision possible. He had seen the strain on Javier and the team, and while he admired their dedication, he knew he couldn't ignore the cost. In the days that followed, he made a conscious effort to check in with the team, to offer support and encouragement. It was a subtle shift, but one that didn't go unnoticed. The impact on the team's relationships was profound. The crisis had brought them closer together, forging bonds that went beyond the professional. They had faced the impossible and come out on the other side. And that shared experience created a sense of camaraderie that was hard to put into words. But it also highlighted the cracks that had been forming under the pressure. The long hours, the constant demands, and the high stakes had taken a toll on their personal lives, and many were left grappling with the fallout. For Javier, the strain on his relationships was particularly acute. He had been so focused on the project that he had neglected the people who mattered most. His family and friends had been supportive, but he could see the toll it had taken on them. He had missed birthdays, anniversaries, and important moments, and he knew he needed to make amends. It wasn't just about saying sorry. It was about showing up, being present, and rebuilding the connections that had been strained by his absence. The public perception of the project was another layer of complexity. When news of the breakthrough broke, it was met with a mix of awe and skepticism. The media hailed it as a game changer, a testament to the power of innovation and perseverance. But there were also questions about the cost, both financial and human. Critics pointed to the long hours, the high-pressure environment, and the toll it had taken on the team. It was a reminder that success often came with a price, and that price wasn't always visible to the outside world. For Musk, the public scrutiny was nothing new. He had always been a polarizing figure, admired for his vision and criticized for his methods. But this time, the criticism hit closer to home. He had always believed in pushing boundaries, in demanding the best from himself and those around him. But the crisis had forced him to confront the human cost of that approach. He knew he couldn't change who he was, but he also knew he needed to be more mindful of the impact his decisions had on the people who worked for him. The personal and legal consequences of the crisis were also a factor. The project had been a massive undertaking, and the stakes had been incredibly high. The team had faced immense pressure to deliver, and that pressure had led to mistakes and oversights. While they had ultimately found a solution, the experience had left scars. Some team members struggled with burnout, while others questioned whether they could continue to work in such a high-pressure environment. For Javier, the experience had been a wake-up call. He had proven that he could handle the pressure, but he also knew he needed to take better care of himself moving forward. Legally, the project was a success. The new battery technology was a breakthrough, and it positioned the company as a leader in the industry. But the crisis had also highlighted the need for better processes and safeguards. The company implemented new protocols to ensure that such oversights wouldn't happen again, and Musk made a point of emphasizing the importance of balance and well-being. It was a step in the right direction, but it was also a reminder of how much work still needed to be done. As the dust settled, Javier found himself at a crossroads. He had achieved more than he ever thought possible, but the journey had come at a cost. He knew he couldn't go back to the way things were, but he also wasn't sure what the future held. He had proven that he belonged in this world, but he also knew he needed to find a way to navigate it without losing himself in the process. Musk, too, seemed to be at a turning point. He had always been driven by a relentless focus on his goals, but the crisis had forced him to confront the human element of his work. He knew he couldn't change who he was, but he also knew he needed to be more mindful of the impact his decisions had on the people who worked for him. It was a delicate balance, one that would require constant attention and effort. In the end, the crisis had been a turning point for everyone involved. It had tested their limits, pushed them to the brink, and forced them to confront the cost of their ambitions. But it had also brought them closer together, forging bonds that went beyond the professional. They had faced the impossible and come out on the other side. And that shared experience created a sense of camaraderie that was hard to put into words. For Javier, the journey had been transformative. He had proven that he was capable of more than he had ever imagined, but he had also learned the importance of balance and self-care. He knew the road ahead would be challenging, but he also knew he had the strength and resilience to face whatever came his way. And as he looked to the future, he felt a sense of hope and possibility that he had never known before. The journey had been anything but easy, but it had been worth it. And for that, he was grateful. The weeks that followed the project's completion were a time of reflection and renewal for everyone involved. The breakthrough had been a triumph, but it had also been a crucible, testing the limits of their endurance and resolve. For Javier, the experience had been transformative. He had proven to himself and to others that he was capable of more than he had ever imagined, but he had also learned the importance of balance and self-care. The relentless pace of the project had taken its toll, and he knew he couldn't continue to push himself to the brink without consequences. He began to make small but meaningful changes in his life, setting boundaries, prioritizing his health, and reconnecting with the people who mattered most. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. He had come too far to lose himself now. Musk, too, seemed to be reflecting on the journey. The crisis had forced him to confront the human cost of his relentless drive for innovation. He had always believed in pushing boundaries, in demanding the best from himself and those around him. But the experience had shown him that there was a fine line between ambition and burnout, and that the people who made his vision possible were not just resources, but individuals with their own limits and needs. In the months that followed, he made a conscious effort to foster a more supportive and balanced work environment. It was a subtle shift, but one that had a profound impact on the company's culture. The team felt more valued, more heard, and more empowered to speak up when the pressure became too much. The project's success had far-reaching implications, not just for the company, but for the industry as a whole. The new battery technology was hailed as a game-changer, a breakthrough that had the potential to revolutionize energy storage and accelerate the transition to renewable energy. It was a testament to the power of innovation and perseverance, but it was also a reminder of the cost of progress. The media coverage was a mix of awe and scrutiny, with some praising the team's achievements and others questioning the toll it had taken on them. It sparked a broader conversation about the ethics of ambition, the balance between innovation and well-being, and the responsibility of leaders to prioritize the health and happiness of their teams. For Javier, the public attention was both exhilarating and overwhelming. He had gone from being a delivery driver to a key player in one of the most innovative companies in the world, and the spotlight was something he was still getting used to. He was proud of what he had accomplished, but he also felt a sense of responsibility to use his platform for good. He began to speak out about the importance of mental health, sharing his own experiences with burnout and the lessons he had learned along the way. His story resonated with people from all walks of life, and he found himself becoming a voice for those who felt overwhelmed by the pressures of modern life. The impact on Javier's relationships was profound. He had reconnected with his family and friends, making a conscious effort to be present and engaged in their lives. It wasn't always easy. Old habits die hard, but he was determined to make amends for the time he had lost. His loved ones were supportive, but they also held him accountable, reminding him that success was meaningless if it came at the cost of his health and happiness. It was a lesson he carried with him, a reminder that balance was not just a luxury, but a necessity. For Musk, the project's success was a validation of his vision, but it was also a humbling experience. He had always been driven by a desire to change the world, to push the boundaries of what was possible. But the crisis had shown him that true innovation required more than just ambition. It required empathy, collaboration, and a willingness to listen. He began to take a more active role in mentoring his team, sharing his insights and experiences while also learning from theirs. It was a shift that didn't go unnoticed, and it earned him a new level of respect and admiration from those around him. As the months turned into years, the lessons of the project continued to resonate. The team had faced the impossible and come out on the other side, but the experience had left an indelible mark on all of them. They had learned the importance of resilience, of teamwork, and of taking care of themselves and each other. They had also learned that success was not just about achieving goals, but about the journey and the people you shared it with. For Javier, the journey had been life-changing. He had found a sense of purpose, a place where he belonged, and a community that supported and challenged him. He had also learned that success was not a destination, but a process, one that required constant reflection, growth, and adaptation. He knew the road ahead would be challenging, but he also knew he had the strength and resilience to face whatever came his way. And as he looked to the future, he felt a sense of hope and possibility that he had never known before. The story of Javier and Elon Musk is a reminder of the power of dreams, the importance of perseverance, and the value of human connection. It is a story about the cost of ambition, the balance between innovation and well-being, and the responsibility we all have to take care of ourselves and each other. It is a story that challenges us to reflect on our own lives, our own goals, and the impact we have on the people around us. As we close this chapter, we invite you to reflect on the lessons of this story. What does success mean to you? How do you balance ambition with well-being? And what can you do to support the people who help you achieve your dreams? We hope this story has inspired you to think deeply about these questions and to take action in your own life. If you enjoyed this story, please like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring content. Together, we can create a world where innovation and humanity go hand in hand, where dreams are pursued with passion and purpose, and where everyone has the opportunity to thrive. Thank you for joining us on this journey.